What are therapeutic peptides? And outside of these ones that have really been blown up in the media, what are the best peptides to have on our radar?
Peptides are fractionated proteins or signaling molecules. Essentially, they're chains of amino acids. The longer the chain, the more likely it has to be injected. The shorter the chain, the more likely it can be consumed orally or used topically. Right now, there's 54 that are commercially available. Guys like me, Dr. William Seeds, people that are well known for peptides, write about them. We talk about how to dose them. We talk about how to cycle them. You talk about how they can be used and stacked in combination with others. But as you said, there are thousands of peptides. They're organically created. They're found in most organic life forms. So they're naturally found in the human body. Like, for example, BPC 157, which stands for body protective compound, is actually found in human gastric juice. Body protective compound is probably the most well-known peptide because it has this amazing ability to increase the rate of healing. They call it the Wolverine peptide because it speeds healing so fast. I've been using BPC since like 2009, 2010 when it first came out. I see it like it's probably 7 to 10 times the rate of healing.
Hey listeners, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Jay Campbell. Jay is a 5-time international best-selling author, men's physique champion, and the founder of the Jay Campbell brand and podcast. Recognized globally as a leading authority on hormonal optimization and therapeutic peptides, Jay has dedicated over 2 decades to teaching men and women how to fully optimize their health while emphasizing the importance of raising consciousness. His work bridges the gap between advanced biomedical strategies and spiritual awakening, offering a holistic approach to human optimization. Jay, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
What's up, my brother? It's a long time coming, man. You were supposed to be on my podcast. Literally, you were one of the last guests before I shut it down after 10 years of being a top 1% podcast. It's so funny because like you and I ran into each other recently and you're like, dude, I think I was on your podcast. And I'm like, oh shit, you were. Did I actually cancel you or did something happen?
You canceled me. Yeah. So I think we'll do something for the membership group.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm going to bring you in for sure. But that was, I do remember that now, but yeah, the last couple of weeks of that were interesting because there was so much going on in the background, but, hey man, it's an honor to be here today, dude. Let's rock this.
Good to have you at the show. So let's just start, just so our listeners have a little bit of context on you and how you got into this work. You've really been at the forefront of peptide therapy and hormonal optimization, things that have just really surfaced in the last couple of years. You've been doing that for a lot longer. And I'm curious, just how did you get into this work initially? Like what was sort of the introduction into this world for you?
Yeah, so for sure. So I'll give you the 100,000 foot summary. I was a former college basketball player. And I was still playing competitively as a 29-year-old in Southern California. And I got kicked in the testicles playing in an adult men's league and, checked out, when you get kicked in the nuts, you know what happens. And 6, 7, 8 weeks later, I started feeling horrible and run down. And I went to my, at the time I worked for the Los Angeles Times in digital advertising and marketing at the very, very beginning. And I went to my PPO doctor. And as I always say, there's no coincidences, only synchronicities. He recommended me to a endocrinologist. And I didn't even know what the fucking endocrinologist was at that point in time. But the guy ran my labs and he said, hey, look, you've got the testosterone level of an 85-year-old geriatric man. I can put you on therapeutic testosterone and have you right as rain. But go home and talk to your fiance at the time to make sure that you guys are both good with this because, you have to inject yourself and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, yeah, okay, no problem, and I went home and I was obviously, previous athlete and I was in condition and stuff like that. So I took care of myself and my physicality pretty much, but I didn't know anything about testosterone, but got her confirmation. And dude, as he said, 7, 8 weeks later, I felt amazing. Like my life was like restored. My low back pains and problems went away. And then, when I went to see him, he was like, okay, I can take you off. I'm like, take me off. Like, I want to learn everything there is to know about this. Like, I feel like a transformed person. So from that point, I was literally at that point now I'm 30 years old. Like I said, I'm living in Southern California. Paul, the next 12 years of my life, I became this like voracious student of therapeutic hormones at the same time that I was learning about therapeutic hormones. And you got to remember, this is 1999, 2000. There was nothing. The internet was still in its infancy. If you wanted to get information on therapeutic hormones, you had to read Russian and Bulgarian text because that's where they had research on it. Of course, we didn't have AI like we do now. So it was really just underground forums, performance enhancement, bodybuilding, places like that, where I just started researching. And there were a couple of books, but they were very rudimentary. And I just became extremely knowledgeable about this. And at the same time I was searching testosterone related stuff, I also started using on myself therapeutic peptides. Now, when I tell people I started using peptides in 2004, they're like, what? Because like most doctors didn't even know what a peptide was until 2018, but I was using them, right? So it's like at the same time that I was gathering all this data, working on myself with testosterone and various other things, I was using peptides. So to fast forward to now in the story, I wrote my first book on therapeutic testosterone in 2015. It blew up. It became a number one. It's still technically neck and neck with my other book, which was written in 2018, the TOT Bible, which is Testosterone Optimization Therapy Bible. On Amazon is the number one selling books of all time. You know, there's thousands of 5-star reviews. Wow. Lots of people, and I don't say this because I have no way to know, but lots of people claim that Jeff Bezos read my first book and made his transformation, because remember, he was this pencil neck weasel guy. And then he became, Bezos with his sleeves, out through his shirt, hanging out, the Playboy debonair. And so a lot of people claim that, hey, dude, as your book blew up on Amazon, where do you think he got his information? So there's probably some truth to that rumor. But forwarding beyond that, I've written 6 other books. 5 of them have become international bestsellers. I've written books on peptides, fasting, fat loss, blah, blah, blah. And, just to bring it all together, when I published my peptide book, which is in early 2023, and I think I told you this before, it was just literally, again, the synchronicities of life, because as the book was published at the end of January of 2023, dude, the vaccine wave of injuries started to hit. And so all these people looking for alternative forms of healing were like, peptides, right? So my book exploded. Now, I was already an accomplished author in the hormone space and even the fasting space, but that book just scaled and everything exploded. And so has my life since then. So it's been like literally in the last 2.5 years, everything that I do has been glorified and glamorized online. And, now I'm looked at as like one of the world's leading experts on peptides, even though that had been kind of established from all my speaking and all the stuff from the previous 10 years on hormones. So I'm really honestly just really blessed that I know a lot of smart people, and I did a lot of, personal research and call it, self biohacking. And I think my greatest gift is, at least in the marketplace, is I have this ability to take very arcane, very esoteric terms, biology, molecular biology, stuff like that, and make that relatable to average people so that they can understand it. And so I think that's really why my information is really blown up, because there's plenty of really smart people out there that, know a lot about peptides and bioregulators and hormones, but they don't have the gift of communicating it to people that aren't like super academic.
Right. Right. And I think that's most of our audience are folks who they probably have heard of the GLP-1 agonists, like Ozempic is the most brand name peptide, but there's hundreds of peptides. BPC 157 is a really commonly known one. So I'd love just to start there and start like, what are therapeutic peptides? And outside of these ones that have really been blown up in the media, what are the sort of ideal or best peptides to sort of know about or pay attention to or have on our radar?
So it's a good question. So at like core base essence, peptides are fractionated proteins or signaling molecules. So it's essentially they're chains of amino acids. The longer the chain, the more likely it has to be injected. The shorter the chain, the more likely it can be consumed orally or used topically. But you're right. I mean, there's hundreds. Right now, there's 54 that are commercially available. And when I mean commercially available, guys like me, Dr. William Seeds, people that are well known for peptides, write about them. We talk about how to dose them. We talk about how to cycle them. We talk about how they can be used and stacked in combination with others. But as you said, and you're right, there are thousands of peptides. And again, they're organically created. They're found in most organic life forms. So they're, naturally found in the human body. Like, for example, BPC 157, which stands for body protective compound, is actually found in human gastric juice. So it's very prevalent in that. And again, body protective compound, you just mentioned it, is probably the most well-known peptide because it has this amazing ability to increase the rate of healing. So it speeds the rate of healing. Like most people, who've seen people that have used BPC, or they call it the Wolverine peptide because it speeds healing so fast. But in my usage, again, I've been using BPC since like 2009, 2010 when it first came out. I see it like it's probably 7 to 10 times the rate of healing. Now, there's certain things it can't do. Like if you break your bone, BPC is not going to do very much. There are other peptides and bioregulators that can accelerate bone healing and the fiber bundles around bone to speed up. But most of the healing that you see with peptides like BPC, and there's another one called TB500, which is thymosin beta 500, is usually around soft tissue. So it's soft tissue that it accelerates. But again, bioregulators, there's some like Sigamir, Cartilere, Osine that speed like bone mineral density formation and strengthen bones and can, speed the rate of like a broken bone healing. So all of these things are truly wonders. And I think for your audience to really understand it, so they really get the difference, is that if you look at current allopathic medicines like I call Rockefeller petroleum distillate drugs, when they break down in the body, they leave a residue, which is literally an oil-based residue. And the oil-based residue creates systemic side effects that break down biological tissue function, organ system function. In fact, the average boomer today is dying from all of the pills that they've taken over the last 10 to 15 years of their life, because those drugs have literally broken down in their systems and cause all sorts of side effects. In fact, it's such a cottage industry. There's many Netflix documentaries made about this, but the average boomer today who's like 68 years old is taking 22 different medications, and 11 of the 22, so half, are literally designed to counteract the side effects of the other medications. So that's how broken the U.S., just call it the Western healthcare system, which again, I call it sick care. Some people call it illness medicine, but that's where we are. Versus if you look at peptides and bioregulators as organic signaling molecules, they're naturally found in the human body. So when you take these, and people will be like, yeah, but Jay, peptides are synthesized. They're still, not natural. They're not organic, like you say. Well, yeah, they're synthesized in a lab, but they're organic signaling molecules. So they're the same thing that's in your body. It's just like therapeutic testosterone. That's synthesized, but it's the same thing that's secreting in your body, both men and women, right? So it's like when these are injected or eaten or rubbed on your skin or, nasally inhaled, they don't cause the side effects that the petroleum distillate breakdown products do because they're not natural. So you're literally looking at, with peptides and bioregulators, you're looking at treating the fundamental root cause of whatever it is that ails you, right? Versus sick care is giving you pills, potions, and lotions to band-aid the symptoms and not actually treat the fundamental root cause. So it's a massive difference in understanding that, when you start using these what I call quantum adjuvants or quantum therapies, that you can heal the root cause of the issue versus the old school way of thinking was just to give you a Band-Aid so that it would cover up the symptom.
And what would you say are like the, 5 to 7 to 10 peptides that everyone should at least have on their radar? They should know a thing or two about. They should maybe do a little bit of research on. They might be useful or helpful depending on their context and where they're at. We talked about BPC 157. A lot of people, like I said, know of Ozempic or the GLP-1 agonist, but what are maybe some others that people should do a little research on or get to know better?
So for the people that watch the show, I have a site. It's jcampbell.com/free books. And they can go there and they can download my peptide book. And that is the number one selling book ever on peptides. It's called Optimize Your Health with Therapeutic Peptides. And it's got 37 peptides in there. And all the information that you and I are talking about right now is much more in depth. And again, it's written so that a very lay person can understand it. But when I talk about peptides, I kind of like to break them down based on like what they do, right? So like most people from an application standpoint are wanting to heal. They want to lose fat. They want to build muscle, feel better, increase well-being. And then obviously they want to sleep better, right? So and then there's cognitive inclined, so nootropic peptides. But if I was going to give you literally like 2 peptides for each classification, I would say that you got BPC and TB500 for healing. BPC increases angiogenesis, so it improves soft tissue healing rates. And then the TB500 suppresses systemic inflammation. So if synergistically, both of them massively accelerate the rate of healing. Those are 2 very profound healing peptides in muscle and fat loss. You have ipamorelin and tesamorelin, and both of those are what are known as GH agonist peptides. If you take them combined, they're very synergistic with each other, but those will increase fat loss, well-being, deeper sleep, better skin quality. Just awesome peptides for that. If you're looking at like nootropic peptides, which again are cognitive enhancing or restoring, you've got like Slank, Dihexa, CMAX. Again, those can be taken as nasal mists. You can inhale them, or you could even inject them, or they're big enough and small enough signaling molecules that you can actually swallow them too. So all three of those, will increase, I would say, prefrontal cortex memory and awareness, and short-term and long-term memory. You get a little bit of a boost. Those are pretty good. If I was going to look at like longevity peptides, because there's stuff that is shortened telomerase, which is obviously the part of the body that is responsible for aging. As your telomeres, you get older, your telomeres shorten and they kind of grind out. And there's some peptides that you can use that are actually oral or injectable that improve telomerase production, so that you will essentially reverse the aging clock or reverse your biological age. And those two would be epitolon and thymolin. And both of those are amazing. Like anyone who's over the age of 50, I'm 54, I'll be 55 in February. I'm almost 55 or almost 54 and a half now. You would take those twice a year for like 10 days in a row, because again, they do so much great stuff to telomerase. So it's lowering your biological age. And then I would say like the last one would be, let me think, so many good stuff. There's so much good stuff out there. Probably something to do with GLPs. You already kind of mentioned them. When we look at GLP peptides, we look at now GLP-2 and GLP-3, because GLP-1, which is the one that people know,
like Ozempic, as an example.
semaglutide, which is Ozempic, is honestly a worthless GLP. Let me explain. We are at a stage now with GLPs where we have appetite suppression, metabolism boost, and brown adipose tissue or white fat tissue acceleration, which is the three primary ways to speed metabolism and to increase fat burning. So why would you use a one stage, which is the basic one, which all it does is suppress appetite, when you have tirzepatide and retatrutide, which do 2 and 3. So like I tell people now, if you really want to understand how to use a GLP correctly, you want to A, microdose it, and B, use either a GLP stage 2 or a GLP stage 3, because you get so many more benefits than just the primary stage 1, which is of course Ozempic. Now, the problem is that in the medical circles, because again, insurance medicine, illness medicine, sick care is so delayed and so slow that like all they offer is the GLP-1. Like they're barely even at a point now where they even offer GLP-2 and GLP-3, but you can get it. I mean, you can buy GLP-2 or GLP-3 from us, right? From a research side of things, or you can just get it from a compound pharmacy if your doctor's smart enough to write an off-label script. So there's obviously ways in the marketplace for smart people to get them. But when I talk about GLPs now, I always tell people like a GLP-1 is a worthless peptide, because why would you just want to delay appetite when you can also boost your metabolism and increase muscle, just call it resting metabolic rate, which improves muscle, building muscle. So you just have to be a little bit hip to the ways of like understanding where to get them. But it's very easy. You follow smart people online and they'll tell you how to get them.
Well, and we'll talk a little bit more about the acquisition process later on, because this is something that we were talking about before we went live, you've been doing more and more around. But before we get into that, you mentioned microdosing in particular. Yes. And I know I've seen more and more articles and news pieces about microdosing, some of these GLP agonists. Definitely. Why is it that you recommend starting with lower doses or microdoses of these compounds?
It's a good question. So in the pharma space, the world is start high, go higher. Why is that? Because they make more money. They saturate the receptors. The consumer, and remember, the consumer using a GLP, 90% of consumers using GLPs are literally flaming dumpster fires. Right. They're obese, they're metabolically dysregulated, and they're insulin resistant. So in order to get them to feel something, they're not Jay Campbell and Paul, right? They're literally people who are metabolically dysregulated. Again, obese, insulin resistant, not in good health. So they give them a huge bolus / dosage, and then they spike it higher and higher and higher week to week to week. And so what ends up happening is, and this is in like 90 to 95% of the people that use them, They stop eating because the appetite suppression works really well, especially at the high dose. But eventually, the stop eating is hell to pay metabolically, right? Because they're not eating enough protein. They're not exercising. They're not building muscle by doing bone bearing resistance training or, hot Pilates or, some sort of isometric stuff. So they're doing everything wrong. But if you're one of those people and you see the weight fall off and your belt loops get tighter and your dress sizes get smaller, you think it's working in the first like 3 to 4 weeks. Right. But again, because you're not doing anything right when you're taking it, eventually you have metabolic, what I call hell to pay. Thyroid shuts down. Most of these people are not hormonally optimized. So they lose muscle. They get the Wegovy face, the Wegovy neck, the Wegovy ass, all the issues that you hear about in the mainstream news. And then their metabolism just goes haywire. And so they regain the weight. They look worse. They feel worse. They go to the media and they slam these drugs and they say they're the worst things ever. They're demonic. They're evil. They're poison, blah, blah, blah. And then you have, I don't need to mention names, I could, but you got the big celebrity doctors that glom on and they're like, yeah, see, we told you these are horrible drugs. No idea what the long-term side effects are. But the truth is, Paul, is they've been using GLP-1 since 2007. And the research, it's only been in the last 4 years that it's become mainstream news and that the average, sheeple on the street has access to them. But they've been around for a long time. And all the research shows that they're some of the greatest drugs ever invented. And what I mean by that is, and this is what your listeners need to understand, is when they're used contextually within the context of what I call health and longevity, they're the greatest drugs ever. They rewire the brain. They eliminate obsessive compulsive disorders. They cure alcoholism. They cure addictions to porn. They cure addictions to video games. They cure obsessive compulsive disorders. And when I say cure, I mean permanently rewire the brain so that these people are not doing this, nonsensical shit anymore. For people like me and you, a microdose eliminates food noise. So you don't have to be like, in the middle of the day and think, fuck, I need a pack of gummy bears or, whatever it is, whatever vice you have, because it's eliminating that at the brain level of like the craving that you have, that you really don't have a physiological craving. You just have a mental craving because your body is used to the hyperpalatability of foods. That's a whole nother podcast, but it cures that. And so like, they're so profound. And not to mention that if you do them in the way that I recommend, which we'll get to in a second about microdosing, we'll go deeper on that. It changes your body composition. You get leaner, you get healthier. Dude, here's the crazy part. And this is what a lot of people still don't even know yet. They improve your biomarkers. So like if you're looking at your labs, which not enough people do this either, but if you regularly get labs and you start microdosing a GLP-2 or GLP-3 peptide, a tirzepatide or retatrutide, dude, everything improves. Cholesterol improves, C-reactive protein improves, homeocysteine improves, like all your inflammatory markers go down. Your HDL goes up. Dude, I mean, literally, as a therapeutic testosterone user now for 24 years, I could never get my HDL cholesterol to go over 45. Since I started using a third stage retatrutide, which has been now about a year and a month, 12 months it's been around, 13 months it's been around. I've been using it for about 13 months, 12 months. In a microdose, my HDL cholesterol has gone up 20 points.
Wow.
20. Wow. And it's not just me. There's people all over the world now on social that are posting their labs and they're saying, look at these corresponding biomarker increases. Again, all healthy parameters and indicators. And so it's like when you—
Why is that, Jay? Why is that happening? Why is it helping to
because
amplify
these drugs have this profound ability to change metabolism. And when I say change metabolism, I mean like improve things at a molecular level, at a bloodstream level that we've never seen before. And again, you only are seeing this though, going back to what you asked me, is like if you're microdosing. So again, going back to what I said, in the pharma world, start high and go higher is to line the pockets of the pharmaceutical manufacturer, to line the pockets of the doctor, to line the pockets of the insurance provider. In the Jay Campbell world, we say start low, go slow.
I say the same thing for psychedelics as well.
Same thing. Nobody's pockets are getting lined. You're doing this in your own rate and speed. You're biochemically unique. You and I are different. You might need a higher dose and I might need a lower dose, but you're never whacking your receptors. You're never creating receptor desensitization or saturation. So you're just always at a point where it's like, okay, I take a little bit, I have a tiny little bit of effect. I go up a little bit and boom, I get an amazing effect. And now I know where I'm at. And now I know what my dose is every week versus the, pharma's approach, overwhelm the receptors and then keep overwhelming the receptors until, dude, basically you overwhelm the receptors for 4 to 6 weeks. It stops working. So not only have you like blasted your body biologically, but now you're at a point where cost is so prohibitive that you're like, how the fuck am I going to do this? Like, I can't keep doing this. And this is what most people experience. And that's why there's so much negative publicity and press about GLPs. They're just not done right. Now, thankfully, there's enough doctors who are listening to people like me. And there's some doctors out there that probably started talking about this, but I've been talking about using GLPs and microdose for 3 years. Okay. And I mean, that's provable. You can go read my books and you can go watch my courses or look at my courses or watch my free videos. And we've been saying that we figured this out a long time ago. So again, will it ever come into the clinical community? I don't know, because if you think about it, at the end of the day, for them to preach clinical, they don't make money.
Right.
You know what I mean? They only make money when they blast your receptors and tell you to start high and go higher. And so it just really, as you know, dude, it comes down to the consumer, educate yourself. The problem is, dude, is the signal to noise ratio on the internet is mostly noise. There's very little signal now. So it's very hard to find the right people that are promoting and, talking about this at the way that this should be done. But if you hear somebody talk about microdosing this and they understand the level that they should, when they understand that from the biomarker, corresponding increases and all the improvements that you see, that's the people you want to listen to. But yeah, if you microdose these things and you stay at a microdose, it's very difficult to screw up.
Well, and what's coming up for me is some of the parallels to psychedelics. It's like people are so sick, especially in America,
exactly,
that these really high doses of the GLP-1s, as you said, are needed so they feel any sort of effect. And we see this even now in psychedelic therapy, where people are so sick with depression or PTSD or addiction that they need that really high dose just to shake them out of.
Yeah,
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And yet, even we've seen this, I'm sure you've seen it in your community as well. People start drinking ayahuasca, every 2 weeks for years, and it just ends up sort of blowing them out, and they have really no capacity to integrate and actually change as a result of it. So it's problematic. The emphasis on these very high doses, I think, is problematic, which is why I've always been a fan of these lower doses, because like you said, you feel it, you can work with it, you notice it, and then you can adjust from there.
Well, it's
Tim Ferriss, patient-centric.
To give Tim Ferriss credit, he said the difference between a pill and a poison is the dosage, right?
Right.
And so in everything in life, whether it's psychedelics, it's peptides, it's hormones, it's supplements, I mean, everything is relative to starting low and going slow. But I mean, we live in a supersized country, bro.
Right.
More is better. Good is more, or more is good and more is better, and the most is best. So it's like we're just in a world where people just don't understand it. And you nailed it. Like, people are so sick, so fat, so inflamed, so diseased, so deranged metabolically that they can't feel. I mean, dude, this, you can't even go to a nice steak restaurant in the United States now and actually get a medium rare, Kobe cut or some form of exotic cut that's not caked with shit.
Right.
Like, when I go to a steak restaurant now, I literally tell the frickin' maitre d' or the waitress or the waiter or whoever it is, I'm like, look, I look at them in the eyes, I say, look, I'm very serious about this. I'm paying for a $200 steak, whatever the fuck it is. I want the steak by itself. I don't want butter on it. I don't want, oil or marinade or whatever
gravy,
whatever God knows shit that your chef is forced to put on it because people are so inflamed they can't taste anything.
Right.
Because, dude, that's why it is. I mean, I say this all the time. You can't, I mean, I'll just give one restaurant, Ruth Chris, right? Famous steakhouse. Good luck getting a decent steak there now, because they're caking their meat with shit. Because the average person is, like you said, so sick. They don't even have taste buds that work. They can't savor the delectable juices from a rare to medium rare cut of steak.
Right.
I know the vegans are hating us listening to that.
Let's talk about. So I want to talk about the God stack a little bit because you've mentioned this concept of the God stack in your work. This feels pretty relevant to psychedelics as well. So tell us a little bit about what does the God stack entail and how does it contribute to being our best?
Yeah, so this is a great question. Nobody's asked me this in a while. So the God stack I originally wrote about in 2021. So it's on my website. It's in the book. But it's changed now, right? Because we are in this wonderful, call it postmodern biochemical golden age. And there's so much stuff that's coming into the marketplace. In fact, right now, Paul, I'm not joking with you. I'm waiting for a product to come from Peptide Sciences. Yes, Jay Campbell buys products from his main competitor, okay? I will admit it right now, but they have a product called OS01, and it's made... The deal is the guy that gave them the license to sell it is a very, very good friend of mine. I think you probably know him, but I won't mention his name because I don't know if he wants me to. But they're the first ones to carry it. We're going to be carrying it. We're going to be selling it too. But this product, dude, is an AMP kinase stimulator. And if you know anything about metabolism, AMP kinase is like literally the furnace of the human metabolism. So if you can tweak it or amp it, and that's why it's called AMP kinase, AMP, you're going to basically accelerate your metabolism. But the beauty of AMP kinase is it has this incredible ability to not downregulate. So you're not going to like over push yourself if you have something to manipulate it. And when I say manipulate it, meaning like increase its acceleration or accelerate its capabilities of burning calories or increasing uncoupling of metabolism and doing all these different things metabolically. So like I'm waiting on this product, but I hear amazing things about it. Some of the people in my inner circle have been using it for like a week. It's only been in the market for like 2 weeks, but they're like, dude, this is one of the greatest oral supplements ever. So I talk about that because there's always things I'm adding to this God stack, but the basics of the God stack are hormonal optimization, right? So like if you're a 40-year-old male in the United States, and probably I should say 30 now, because as you know, it's so bad in most coastal populations. There's Austin. I mean, Austin's a cesspool. San Francisco's a cesspool. Miami's a cesspool. New York's a cesspool. Atlanta's a cesspool. I mean, there's so much biochemical degradation in the environment that most people have a hormone deficiency. Now, again, when I say most people, this is men and women. This is not just one sex. And by the way, there's only two sexes. Let me make sure that people are aware of that. But seriously, like if you're a male or a female in the United States right now, and you live in a major city and you don't get your hormones measured and evaluated, it's likely you have a hormone deficiency. So that's first line of action is, do I have a hormone deficiency? If I do, how am I going to treat it? Am I going to do it naturally? Which is, you can do that. It's very difficult to optimize your hormones naturally now because of the contamination in the environment. But there's people that can do it. You can get super anal retentive, change your diet, change your lifestyle, stop drinking alcohol, stop drinking anything that's contaminating you from like a phytoestrogen or xenoestrogen standpoint. But for most people, the biggest needle mover is to get on therapeutic hormones. And that's for both men and women. So that's option one in the God stack. Are your hormones optimized? And if they're not, how are you going to do it? Option two would be a growth hormone agonist peptide or using human growth hormone itself. Now, human growth hormone, most people, when they hear that, they're like, ooh, cancer causes, stay away. The medical establishment has brainwashed so many people about that. But the real truth about human growth hormone is if you use a microdose of it, Monday through Friday, depending on your age, Monday through Saturday, or even every day of your life, if you're 60 and older, it's a game changer. I mean, human growth hormone, increases metabolism, improves fat loss, improves resting metabolic rate, gives you deeper polyphasic sleep and restorative sleep. I mean, there's so many things it does. When you combine a microdose of growth hormone with a microdose of therapeutic testosterone, and if you're a woman, progesterone and estradiol, and even men can use estradiol. Now that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But if you're doing those two things are the basis of the God stack. If you can't get human growth hormone, and a lot of people can't, but if you can, and by the way, it's very affordable now. Before COVID, it was not. But now after COVID, there's been some benefits like, there's offshore pharmacies that sell it to people in the West, and it's very, very affordable. But between, therapeutic hormones, therapeutic growth hormone or growth hormone agonist peptides. And by the way, the growth hormone agonist peptides would be what we talked about already, tesamorel and ipamorel. And those are the two primary ones. That's kind of your foundation. Beyond that, now we want to optimize the thyroid gland. And we can do that through, what's his name? Ancestral, crazy, Liver King, ancestral.
Brian Johnson.
Yeah. So
Brian Johnson.
He's a crazy, psychopathic liar. But besides that, he's got great products. He sells an ancestral liver product that is the next best thing to the drug. And the drug is the best thing. It's called desiccated thyroid. But when we optimize our hormones and we also optimize growth hormone, we also have to optimize the thyroid because the thyroid is the master temperature and regulation gland of the body, right? So it's like we can't leave that behind. So we either take desiccated thyroid, which is porcine, which is, comes from pig. Why are pigs so similar to humans? That's a whole nother rabbit hole, but very, very similar. So you take a very small, it's a pill of desiccated thyroid, AM and PM, and that pushes your natural thyroid production up just a wee bit, which is something you want to do when you're on hormones and peptides because everything is already upregulated a little bit, right? So you want to keep the thyroid gland also pushed up. What most people mistake in the hormone optimization space is they will optimize their hormones and not optimize their thyroid. And so after 6 months, the thyroid becomes sluggish and it drags down the whole hormone program because it's not also optimized. So it's like the people who mentored me and all the things that I know, they always say, look at the system as a triune. You've got the endocrine system, which is your hormones. You got your thyroid, which is your master temperature gland. And then you have your pancreas over here, which is your blood glucose, right? Your sugar. And so all three of those things, when you're optimizing them, have to be looked at and optimized accordingly because you can't leave one leg of that triune broken. So for the pancreas, for the God stack, you'd be using metformin or dihydroberberine, and preferably both. And that might be why we're coming out with a supplement called BioAbsorb that has both of them together. And we'll be the first company in the world to have them together. But both of those products, so people understand, they improve insulin sensitivity, which, as you know, as you get older, insulin sensitivity is the most important factor to live a long life. As your insulin sensitivity decreases as you get older, that's what's going to lead you to have diabetes, glaucoma, and the big one is Alzheimer's or any neurodegenerative disease, because all neurodegenerative disease is type 3 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is obviously when your pancreas stops running and you become fat and insulin resistance and you can't process food and calories anymore. Type 3 diabetes is when it's beyond that and it's into the brain. So we want to make sure that we never get to type 3 diabetes by changing our lifestyle and then using things like metformin and dihydroberberine, which obviously regulate insulin sensitivity and improve blood glucose formation. So those would be your base of the God stack. Beyond that, you can just use whatever you want depending on your life, right? Do you want to use nootropics to increase your brain power? Do you want to use, specific healing agents to improve healing? Do you want to use longevity agents to increase, telomerase expression? I mean, it really just comes down to you, but those are kind of the bases of the God stack, like the mitochondrial stuff that I was just talking about, like OS01 that I'm waiting on. Hopefully it'll be here when I get off this podcast. Something like that is a pill that just stimulates your mitochondria. So the rage, as you know, right now, whenever you go to these conferences, everybody's talking about mitochondria. We got to optimize our mitochondria. We got to make sure our mitochondria don't spin or overspin. So it's like mitochondria is the big thing in biohacking right now, but you also have to understand what is the purpose of the mitochondria. And I think most of your users know, if they remember back to 101 or, basic ninth grade biology, is that the mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cells, right? So if you're fat and you're insulin resistant and metabolically deranged, as one of my good doctor friends calls it, if you're a metabolic emergency, your mitochondria do not work. Like literally fat people, just very honestly, their mitochondria are turned off. So when, all these people in the biohacking space, Dave Asprey, people selling MitoPure, MitoZen, all these companies are attempting to get people's mitochondria to start functioning again. So they sell supplements, they sell injections, NAD plus, patches of NAD. I mean, all these things are designed to increase mitochondrial rate of spin. But again, if you're fat and you have these issues, it's very difficult to optimize your mitochondria through supplements. So for people like that, they need to inject stuff. And they need to inject stuff like 5-amino, MOTC, SS31. These are all peptides. And these are all mitochondrial, like boosting or sparking peptides. So if you give a fat person who has zero energy to exercise or work out, and you give them 500 micrograms of MOTC, inject them right here, inject them in the belly or whatever, within 20 minutes, they're going to be like, let's go work out. And it just turned on all their mitochondria. The problem,
500 micrograms. That's it. That's like half of a milligram.
It's probably a little bit more, but I mean, that's a decent
but
enough.
It's a tiny amount. That's a tiny amount.
Yeah. It really depends. I mean, I'm saying 500 micrograms is probably like 5 milligrams, right? Because I'm looking at a 10 milligram vial and I'm just thinking middle of the syringe. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit, but for most people, again, who are inflamed, who have no mitochondria, they're going to feel something. It's the same thing with like NAD, right? If you take a very lean, muscular, optimized person, man or woman, and you inject them with NAD plus, they're not going to feel anything. And the reason they're not going to feel anything is because their mitochondria are already superpowered. Right. They're already fired on. They're twitched on. But if you take somebody who isn't, they're going to feel something. And that's why, you've got way more people buying mitochondrial stuff because there's so many people that are not conditioned. People that are in shape are less than 10% of society. Majority of society is out of condition. They're not in good shape. And so they need things to turn on their mitochondria. And obviously the ones that turn them on the most are the ones they buy the most of. That's why like majority of peptides that are injectable that are sold today that are, known about are the NADs, the MOTCs, the SS31s, the peptides that literally, as soon as you inject them, if you're out of shape and overweight, you feel it. You have energy to like go work out. The problem, Paul, is that it doesn't last because obviously your mitochondria are not efficient. So that, artificial boost that you get for 2-3 hours isn't going to last someone who is leaner. And again, someone who's leaner still gets benefit from these. They just don't feel it like the heavier person feels it. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about legal, gray area, black market, right? Like we know of Ozempic or these other GLP-1 agonists are now sold through a lot of the major pharmaceutical companies. A lot of these compounding pharmacies that have created peptides have been cracked down on. I know you yourself, you probably have a few anecdotes or stories to share about, peptides. And so just tell us a little bit about what is the sort of legal landscape around peptides? How should people think about therapeutic peptides in terms of accessing them or, getting them or whatever that might be?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me unpack this even more. So I launched this company in October. We went public in November. And then in December is when we were really actually had inventory and started selling the products. So my company is a research chemical manufacturer. And what that means is that we manufacture peptides, both oral, topical, and injectable, and then also bioregulators for research purposes only. But here's the thing. Research purposes only means that whether you're using it on yourself for research or your pet rat or hamster or your cat or your dog, it's for research purposes, you're indemnifying the seller that you're using it for research.
Got it.
It's not approved by the FDA, but that doesn't mean that the company, including ours, doesn't have a lab that manufactures the products that is considered FDA certified and FDA registered. I mean, the whole FDA process, bro, is a sham. It's literally pay for play. Like you can be FDA registered, FDA certified, and FDA cleared, but not FDA approved. So if you're a compound pharmacy, in order for you to legally manufacture peptides and then sell them to doctors clinically, you have to be certified, cleared, registered and approved. Okay. So the difference between us and them is we're not approved. And every level is just pay for play. 503A is different than a 503B. And the difference is the 503A pays more money to get a 503A credibility and certification than the 503B does. It's all insane, right? So there's not a lot of differences, though, for the average user watching this podcast as far as the quality of the peptides. And again, that's what all people give a shit about, right? Because if you're going to inject this into your body or swallow these, you just want to make sure it's not going to hurt you. You're not going to have any kind of issues. And very truthfully, the majority of people that sell therapeutic injectable peptides, whether they're compound or research, you're ever going to have an issue. And this is also a true story too. And so people understand this. Very rarely does anyone get side effects from injecting peptides. Like you could inject an entire vial, and again, whether it's a compounded or research quality, and the most you might get is like a little bit of like nausea, stomach upset that lasts for 10 to 20 seconds, or maybe sight, irritation. You get little red welts where you inject it or something like that. But I mean, you're never going to like have an overdose and die like you would with like a Rockefeller petroleum distillate medication. So again, the risk is so minimal and nominal with peptides. But, back to the original question, oral products, nobody gives a shit about. What they care about is, when I say that with a grain of salt, don't kill anybody, it's like doctors take an oath to do no harm, but as our attorney and our counsel say, and any good counsel in compounded world will say too, it's not really what happens. It's what you can prove. And at the end of the day, if a person dies from an overdose on peptides, which I've never heard of, but there's always outliers, did that person die due to the peptide or did that person die due to their lifestyle? It's up to the, counsel and defense to prove that, there's a burden of proof that the person died from the peptide versus the person's lifestyle. So I would just tell you, it's very difficult to prove something like that. But at the end of the day, there's very little difference. Just be cautious of like where you're getting your peptides if you're buying them from a research company, because Paul, as you know this, there are many companies that are in the peptide space right now because it's a giant movement that are literally brewing shit up in their kitchens and bathrooms. And
really,
and I would say basements. Oh yeah. Dude, I'm not exaggerating. There's hundreds of peptide companies out there right now. They're not manufacturing them and they're not making them in FDA registered or FDA certified or sterility processed and approved in GMP compliant facilities. They're making them in basements. They're making them in bathrooms. They're making them in kitchens. So it's, again, be very cautious if you're the end user, you're the consumer, on where you get your peptides. If you buy them from Peptide Sciences, which is a massive $100 million company, you pretty much know you're going to be getting them from a legit operator. If you buy them from our company, which is a legit American-made, certified, processed, sterility controlled, all that, you're getting them from a legit company. And there's many other peptide research manufacturers out there that are similar, but there are some that are fly by night. So just be very cautious where you get them. And I would even say this for the fly by night people, even they are very, very good at making peptides. And truthfully, because people don't ask me this very often, it's not hard to make peptides. It doesn't take a rocket scientist, with a biochemical engineering degree from MIT with a doctorate from Yale to brew up peptides. It's garden variety stuff. It's just, when you're doing it, are you doing it in a safe facility that does have GMP compliance and is like, again, FDA registered or FDA cleared? That's the question. And in those type of facilities, the risks are so low because obviously it's all good manufacturing process. That's what GMP stands for, good manufacturing process.
Fascinating. So research, for research only. Now, Jay, if folks want to check out, because you do have, especially over the last, I think 5 months now, 5-6 months now, you've been coming out with a lot more oral solutions, topical solutions, injectable solutions as well, which we'll see how long that continues. But if folks do want to like learn more, you already mentioned the ebook that they can download, but if they're interested in purchasing peptides or exploring this further, where can you point them? Where should they go for? Yeah,
for sure. So my company is called BioLongevityLabs.com. And let me break that down because you set me up really good. We have right now 9 custom oral formulations that we built ourselves. And most of them have multiple peptide formats or peptide formulations in these customized formats. And I will tell you this without, not bragging, no BS, no hyperbole, they're the best in the world. And I can say that because obviously I'm putting my, expert opinion and knowledge of these peptides to real world use in manufacturing this. But like, for example, we have a peptide called not a peptide, it's a product, called BioGut Pro, and it has 6 peptides in it. And not only does it have 6 peptides in it, it's got L-carnosine, it's got sodium bicarbonate, it's got PEA. All of those chemicals are additives to make absorption better, to make sure that the bioavailability and the quote unquote stability of all of those peptides together holds form. So that if you're taking that and you have any kind of gut issue, dude, in 10 days, it'll be healed. I mean, it is the strongest gut healing product in the world. And then we imagine having 5 other products, BioRestore, which is a oral format of BPC, the highest quality, most milligram per dose BPC in an oral format, along with like 5 other things that make it synergistic, which are also profound. BioMind is a nootropic oral formulation. That was the one that we were giving away to people at the summit, and everybody was coming back saying, holy shit, what is this? So we have like all these amazing brand new custom formulations that are basically, like I said, tip of the sphere from, people. It's not just myself, but some other people that work in my form that are in my inner circle that are the highest level formulators on planet Earth. Essentially, they're pretty much geeking out to make stuff because this is like kind of their like ultimate goal was like to have a company that would say, hey, I want the best. Doesn't matter what it costs. What can we get the best? And so that's what we're kind of doing with our products. And so ultimately you kind of, let the cat out of the bag or the genie out of the bottle, but eventually we're just going to have one site that's oral products and they're all going to be the top of the line oral products in the history of the world. Like all the Russian bioregulators, there'll be mixes and blends that we're customizing that take the best of the best and mix them together so that people don't have to go buy this, this, and this and take them all in different times. So we're going to just continue to custom formulate and continue to make the most effective blends. And I would assume that within the next 3 to 6 months, BioLongevity Labs will be that site. And then all of the injectable stuff, which is the stuff that the credit card processors, look down on, will probably be on another site, but we'll probably make that site even more aggressive than we have now because we'll probably be doing more custom blends and more bleeding edge stuff that most people don't have access to so that they can experiment again on themselves as a research user or on their animals or whoever. Right. So that's like where it's all going. But, the world has changed. We haven't mentioned, RFK Jr. We haven't mentioned the kind of the mindset that is out there now. I mean, like I say, when people ask me, they're like, do you think the FDA is ever going to suppress peptides? Because they ask me that all the time. I said, there's absolutely no way. The peptide genie is well out of the bottle and they can't bottle it up. And as you know this from the psychedelic world, if there's a demand, there's always going to be a supply. You can't cut off the supply. You can't go out there and cut off the heads of all the research chemical companies and say, you can't make peptides anymore because they'll just make them underground.
Right.
And then it'll even get worse and even shadier. Right. You know what I mean? So it's like I always say, if there's a demand, there's a supply. And when the message is in the marketplace, you can't suppress it. This is not 60 years ago behind the Iron Curtain, in 1985, before the wall came down in the Soviet Union. You couldn't suppress information like you could then with the internet, bro.
Right.
There's just no way that they can destroy any of this. I mean, they can still try to suppress and they can still, shut down our credit card processing and companies like me and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, they can't. It's what's the way they say it? It's a zero-sum game. Because they're going to lose because it'll just be, it's like they say, you cut off the head of the snake and 10 snakes pull out.
Right.
So it's just going to constantly amplify. And so I feel confident that like we're in a golden age. And as long as you listen to the smart people and the right people and you understand about microdosing, you're not going to hurt yourself. And if anything, you're going to benefit in so many different ways. But again, just, start low, go slow, educate yourself and be smart when you do stuff.
I love that. So jcampbell.com/
free books, jcampbell.com/free books. And then you can find me on social media pretty much everywhere that I haven't been canceled. TikTok canceled me. I'm on X, IG, YouTube, and LinkedIn. If you call LinkedIn social media, I don't know what LinkedIn is, bro. But you'll find me. You'll find I do damage on X and IG. I do have a company that posts my stuff there. So I mean, I'm there, but I'm not there. But you can find me on X. If you send me a message on X, I'll get back to you.
And then BioLongevity Labs is if folks want to.
Yeah, so it's BioLongevity Labs. Use the affiliate code Third Wave to save 15%.
Epic. Jay Campbell, it's been great to have you on the show. This feels like I would like to have you back to go deeper because it is, we were able to touch on some of the fundamentals. This is a primer more than anything. And so as questions come in and folks are learning more about peptides, to do a particular interview on how that overlaps with psychedelic integration or psychedelic preparation, I think would also be really fascinating because I know that's something that you yourself have explored.
Yeah, we didn't talk about 5-MeO. I mean, so yeah, right. The next time we come back, this was like the perfect whet the appetite. Right. Because now we can really go deep down the rabbit hole on psychedelics and talk about consciousness.
BioLongevityLabs.com. Jay Campbell, it's good to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Paul. It was awesome, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. The psychedelic space is evolving every day, and we have a ton of amazing content that's coming out, and subscribing is the best way to keep up to date with all of that great content.